My name's Sgt Dougie Page and I'm Ministry of Defence Police. The briefing is that the Ministry of Defence Police will be providing the policing services for today's cabs demonstration. We have a positive duty to protect your right to peacefully protest whilst taking due regard for your safety and the safety of others. We would request that you conduct yourself in a manner that does not impinge upon the rights and safety of others, and that other persons and road users are not impeded or obstructed in going about their daily business. Please be advised that Section 128 of the Serious Organised Crime and Police Act 2005 creates an offence of trespassing in a designated site. RAF Menwith Hill is one of those designated sites specified within the Act. Any acts of trespass within the secure perimeter fence line will render you liable to arrest. I think that's very unlikely that anybody will breach that offence because you have to actually go inside the establishment to do it. A safe and appropriate place to conduct your protest is the clearly defined area behind the barriers. The police will ensure your safety, which will allow you to protest and be clearly seen by persons exiting the base. You are requested to refrain from protesting elsewhere on Menwith Hill Road, where there is not the same level of protection. You can see the barriers there. Actually, one of your signs is already on them. Please comply with the directions of the police officers present during the demonstration. The officers will control the flow of traffic exiting or entering the base to ensure your safety and the right to peacefully protest, whilst also maintaining the safety and rights of all other road users. This is a primary objective in respect of the policing presence during the demonstration. Please assist us in achieving this aim by adhering to the advice and guidance contained within this information sheet. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Well, I do. I mean, it says RAF on the door, doesn't it? But it's mostly Americans in here. Why are the British police protecting what is effectively an American base?
This is a Ministry of Defence establishment. The commander of the base is an RAF personnel. It's Ministry of Defence and we are Ministry of Defence Police, therefore we are protecting Ministry of Defence property.
Okay, but it's mainly Americans.
Americans are hosted on the establishment, but it's not an American base, it's an RAF base.
Because I'm from Bristol, just around the corner from us we've got GCHQ. Right. This is an American version of that, isn't it?
Some of the people in here are from GCHQ. There are British personnel from GCHQ who work in here, but there are some Americans as well.
And what's the purpose of this place?
I have got no idea. All I know is a government communications establishment.
Are you happy about American bases here in Britain?
I don't have an opinion.
You're just here to do your job?
I am, yes.
And all these golf balls, I mean, that's the one thing with Menwith Hill, that anyone that drives past or sees photographs of it, they see these giant golf balls. Why the golf balls?
They're to protect the equipment that's underneath them. That's what they're there for. It's to protect them from weather. Okay,
and satellite dishes. So the other thing is that, for example, you can't see where the satellite dish is pointing. Anyway, this sort of protest, is there really any need for you to be here? Because you've got enormous gates and everything stopping anybody getting in. I mean, the people who are standing out here have got flags. They're not even in the way.
I can't tell you my opinion on it, but that is the plan that we have here to deal with the demonstration. There's actually only two of us here that's actually...
If I look around, I can see more security people.
The security people are looking after the security of the establishment. They're not here for the demonstration.
Has anyone ever got into this place?
People have got in, but not very far. Yeah, a long time ago there was no fence around the exterior here, so it was a lot more difficult to keep the place secure. But obviously, due to occurrences since then, it's had to be made more secure, and that's probably when you're referring back to. It's now our responsibility.
So what happened to the North Yorkshire Police?
The North Yorkshire Police have handed it over to us.
I'm Sarah Swift. I come from Ripon, and I'm here because I'd like to challenge what's going on in there and to make it more accountable. Probably.
So what is going on in there? All we got from the policeman just now was, well, it's a communication base, that's all I know.
Yes, well, I think the communications are to do, you can put me right if I'm wrong, to do with missile defence partly, perhaps to do with surveillance of communications in Britain, as Edward Snowden, talked about Menwith Hill.
We heard about something called PRISM, didn't we, which is supposed to be listening into everything pretty much in real time. And so if you say something, whether it's being listened to when your phone is switched off or whatever, what they can do is switch it through to a live person in the US who can then listen live to what you're saying and, if necessary, flag it up. So that our whole PRISM business is quite incredible. And also, of course, Google does this too. As you're searching, if you're searching for words that someone has decided they don't like and they want to check you, they can then live watch you online surfing and searching if you've put certain terms into Google. Anyway, a bit annoying that Google cooperates with these people so much. In fact, some people say it's just a front for them. But anyway, what do you know about what's happening in there? What do we actually know?
I think that we rely on whistleblowers like Edward Snowden to tell us, the sorts of things that are going on. Apart from missile defence, obviously, sorry to go back, if we ask our MPs to ask questions, that's sometimes a way of getting information, isn't it?
So missile defence, I mean, that sounds okay. It doesn't sound too threatening. What's the problem with that?
Unfortunately, it enables a first strike by the Americans. It's not just defensive. The name is perhaps misleading, do you think? I personally think it is misleading. I think the problem is that it's all escalating a conflict situation in the same way that the modernising of nuclear weapons, which Obama, modernising in inverted commas, is investing in, seems to me to escalate conflict rather than to work towards disarmament or work towards more trusting relationships.
We've just had a Trident vote as well, haven't we? So I suppose that's part of this big military industrial complex we see here.
I'm Brigid-Mary Oates. I come from Bradford. I used to be joint coordinator with Lindis Percy, but I had to give that up because of other things that I have to do. I think the reason that I'm here is that we actually really don't know what's going on in there. And if you read, there's a lovely booklet that's been written about Menwith Hill and about how actually I don't think it were ever passed in Parliament for them to actually build here. It was more or less allowed to happen. In them days, they were kind of selling it that you were giving sort of economy to the local industry and businesses. Well, actually, that's not happened because we know fine well that they're shipping their own American stuff and that they are quite independent. We know now that everything's been demolished, so there's not as many personnel on there. So that sort of highlights to me that it's becoming more technical. And actually, what's going on? I do believe...
well, we've just got another guy going in here in his black car, zipping in. I mean, it's obviously employing some people, and these mostly seem to be local people.
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
How do you know?
How do you know?
That they're local people?
Because they're driving a British car, not necessarily. When we were allowed to stop the cars before it was in contention, I think most of the cars that we stopped were Americans.
Yes. I also think there are a lot of very obviously American cars coming out often.
Yes, yeah.
Especially, and perhaps now at this moment, going out through the other gate, to be honest.
Okay, so you're saying when you're doing your protest here, you've got people disappearing in and out on an alternative exit?
Yes, which they normally, on most weekends, and on other weeknights, do not have open. They have it open specially on the demonstration night because we're so frightening.
We're very peaceful and we are in contention about the yellow line. We were able to protest and to stop the traffic coming out, the cars, vehicles coming out in a really peaceful way. And you know what? Lots of the personnel that were coming out were fine and dandy about that and were actually quite supportive. But the Americans, we've just been informed that the Americans have decided to change the goalposts, and now they've drawn another line which even the MDP don't agree with, and putting us behind some barriers. And that was because a nice American, I believe, tried to run one of the protesters down, or allegedly.
Yes, yeah. It was. I think he's been charged with grievous bodily harm. Did you know about? Not with intent, just grievous bodily harm, but he's pleading not guilty. I think the CCTV, which the MDP were even surprised he would do that, shows conflicting evidence to that without going into the detail of it.
So the MDP, these are the Ministry of Defence Police, are they?
Yes.
And so you're doing a protest and some American actually drove into somebody? Did he actually hurt them?
Yes, went over her foot. It shouldn't make any difference, the age, but we're talking about an elderly Quaker lady, aren't we, here? And what she feels bad about, funnily enough, is that she was actually smiling at the man and then he just didn't stop, accelerated towards her. And the case is ongoing. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It's going for trial.
Yes.
It's going for trial. And as a consequence of that, this was last August. They thought it was a good thing to do a risk assessment, which they did in October. And then suddenly, in March, they decided to use the power of dispersal on the ground there and arrested Lindis Percy. And now we're not allowed to go over the yellow line and we have to go where we're told. And it ran really well before, really, really well. It was policed really well, facilitated, good humour, we all got along together. In fact, we used to have tea parties, didn't we, every evening. But now, what they're saying now is what he's actually said, is it's the Americans that have changed it all and they seem to want this kind of confrontation.
So do you have any kind of communication through your MP about what's going on here?
Fabian Hamilton is really, really good in going and asking questions from Leeds. And he's really good and asks questions for us. But Lindis probably is more responsible. Yes, I think the MPs they're not able to go in there and find out what's going on as easily as that. It is really not simple, is it, for them to find out what's going on either. And this is one of the worries, really.
But the thing is that, the military of defence sort of police, they don't know what they're guarding. So they're telling us that they're trying to keep us safe, but how are they keeping us safe when we've got something that's a massive target to a possible target for an enemy?
But, obviously the military have got to communicate, haven't they? And if they aren't going to communicate, then they're not going to win any battle. And we're wasting our money. They're throwing our money down the drain if they can't communicate.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. But I just feel that we've probably gone back to how it used to be probably years ago for our protests. And we have a right, in this country we still have a right to protest, and we should be able to protest as we were doing previously, and we're not given that right here.
But if you look at some of these flags, some of the things we're objecting to are things like the illegal use of drones, which is obviously there's been a lot in the press about. And so in a way it's a publishing or publicising, advertising the fact that we're challenging those things to do with communications, that you can wage warfare at a distance and the problems of that, really.
We also have links with Guantanamo, London Guantanamo campaigns, so we do, quite often we do vigils and for the Guantanamo, the closure of Guantanamo, so we did one last week, didn't we? Because it was President Obama's promise that he would close Guantanamo down, and I think 2 weeks ago he had 200 days to fulfil his promise. Last Tuesday it was 191 days, so we came up and we dressed up in our Guantanamo outfits and had a nice placard for that, so we do have links with that. We also have links with Jeju Island, South Korea.
Yes, I think there's a sense of showing solidarity with movements opposing US bases in other parts of the world, which are obviously a lot better supported than this, demonstration here, like in Ramstein or Okinawa or, these places. And I think that we're trying to, be in solidarity with this as well, I think.
Get guest speakers. You were saying about Bruce Gagnon. He was here.
Beginning of the one explaining about the missile defence to me, that in the war games that they play, they play they practice a first strike scenario. And this had been published in some erudite journal. They obviously thought nobody would actually read this, that this was what was going on. That it wasn't just missile defence, in inverted commas, it's also could be an offensive weapon.
So whereabout? I mean, the Americans have been in Britain since the war. I mean, it's not really that much chance of them going, is there?
We're always hopeful. We can but try. I think while ever they're here and forcing themselves around the world, because that, in effect that's what they are doing, and they are being opposed everywhere for this. They've not got one in Sweden yet, but we do know that they're using part of the north of Sweden, I think, to do the practicing with the aircraft. You know, how to kill people better, I suppose, how to bomb people. We know that happens.
Well, that's a bit naughty, isn't it? Because Sweden's not supposed to be in NATO.
Absolutely. Well, you talk to some of our lovely colleagues over in Sweden, and they will tell you, and actually they kind of joke about it, that it's becoming like another state of, of America. So there are many people around the world that oppose what's happening and how they're enforcing their bases there. So, yeah, how do we stop them? How do we do it? We don't get enough people here to protest. People are not aware of it. We don't really see in mainstream media, oh, look, America are just building another base somewhere. We don't get to hear that, do we? And we're not meant to hear that.
Yes, you have to really pick through the BBC News
to
find it.
It's sold that it's for our safety, but actually is it for our safety?
I agree. The question.
I mean, we've just had to vote this week on Trident, haven't we, as well, which is an American system. The British obviously decided that they need to be friendly with the Americans in order to buy this technology.
Yes, but this is very worrying, isn't it, really? Because, why are we so influenced by them? And do people really see the dangers of it? I'm not convinced, really. Partly because of the way things are reported in the media. And it's almost like a vicious circle. We've created a situation where Russia feels perhaps under threat, encircled by US bases, NATO bases, and the Russians have given away a lot in the past, haven't they? Previous presidents have given away a lot, it seems, to the US, to me. Yeah. Well,
they've certainly given away a lot of the former Soviet Union. Many of those countries are now NATO countries.
Exactly. And, the verbal agreement wasn't it, that NATO would not be expanded, and we're doing it all the time, it seems to me, making it larger. And then when we expect Russia not to be aggressive in return, it seems to me.
But you can't uninvent nuclear weapons.
Exactly. It's the whole. That's why I say it's a vicious circle that it goes on, doesn't it? Because we've created this effect.
We don't love it either, do we? And don't mean to say that we have to want it. We don't want it. We wish that we could undo it, but it's not. It's not as if every country has them. We're talking, is it about nine places that have nuclear?
Yeah, and there's some that don't like to admit it, either.
Well, there are, but there's lots of things that are going on, in other nations that we don't get to know about. So it's not as if that every country that we're in sort of immediate threat from every other country that has nuclear weapons. It's not like that. So I'm really concerned, and no, I will fiercely protest Trident, and in any way that I can.
Most of the press this week has been talking about it as 30 billion. The Guardian a few weeks ago reported actually it's more like 205 billion. So we're even being told porky pies when it comes to the figures. Let's just go back to this whole thing of uninventing nuclear weapons. It's impossible.
It is impossible to uninvent, but I think money could be spent better, to be honest. And I think they were on about renewing Trident and getting rid of Trident and spending lots more money on it. Well, it's hardly second hand, is it?
Yes, and we need to spend money on doing the things. I'm not I'm not being specific here about what they are, that could create more peace, that would avoid conflict and make people more content in their own places, more better feeling of well-being, because it's like we've seen it, I think, with the Brexit thing, that when people feel bad, they feel fearful and aggression follows. And I just feel that it's all very well, you can't just focus on nuclear issues, it's got to be to do with thinking of the things that actually make for peace, or doing those things, whatever they are, widening your options really, rather than relying on a nuclear weapon. And at the moment, we're cutting back on conventional forces, or, to defend our country.
These Trident submarines, some people say that Britain doesn't even really control them.
I can imagine that. No comment.
People say. How would we find that out? How would we get to the bottom of that? How do we find out the truth? We're here. CAB is a campaign for accountability of American bases, and we've been going with 14 years here, but previous to that, much longer.
This has been campaigning since about 1992, wasn't it?
1992, and we're still, nobody's still accountable for what's going on. So how do we do that? How do we make people accountable? The only way that we can do that is by putting pressure, putting MPs under pressure, by getting more people involved, and quite honestly, we're failing to do that because people are so immersed into actually having to live a life and to survive. People's mental health, people's well-being is not very good at the moment. We're facing massive cuts to our NHS, massive cuts to public services. I'm a public sector worker, and I can see what's happening, and I'm absolutely devastated. And it's not for the good of the people. People are focusing on just trying to survive and to make a living and to make a better life for the families, and they're not concerned on what's going on, out of that. I work for public services. I work with children and families, children that are looked after, children that may have been adopted, children that have gone through, and families that have gone through massive early years trauma. And we should be providing services for these children and families. And actually we're not. We're having cuts to those services. This is a massive thing. And we're seeing, massive difficulties in family lives, that people are not coping, that the families are splitting up, children are being taken away from parents, and it's not good. So the services that were there that were set up to support that and to help that, they've been taken away. So what are we doing? We're just sort of focusing on that, and we're making it worse. So more and more people cannot actually think beyond what's going on and think of the bigger picture on what really is happening here. And all the decisions that are being made and the things that are brought in the back door in Parliament that we don't hear about because we're distracted with something else, And truly, they're just having to get on with their lives. So why are they going to be interested in coming up here on a Tuesday night when they probably don't have transport anyway?
Well, it's a bit depressing. It sounds like these people have won. The Americans and the military have won.
Not while I'm alive. No, I don't think they have, because we have to have faith that there are caring people about, that there are people that can think like that. That I'm fortunate that, I can get up here. You're fortunate you can get up here. We can, all right, times difficult for us because we're busy getting on with our lives. We've got families, and this is not just what I do. I do lots of other things, as Sarah does. But, we do come up here and we do care, and we network with other people, and other organisations with CND and People Global, the Global Peace Network, which you've mentioned about Bruce. So that's what we do. And sometimes it's quite cheering to know that you're not alone, because last night when I was sat watching telly in bed, watching the vote of Trident, I just felt the loneliest person alive.
Yes, that's right. So it's a solidarity thing, and I think it's interesting to me that people want, even though there's only 2 people here, they want a picture to put on Facebook, people who can't be here, you know. And the actual doing of something must be significant. There's many more people who go on that Facebook site than who come up here to demonstrate. Why does it matter to them to have a picture of people actually demonstrating on a Tuesday night? It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is bizarre.
But I think it's sort of, the action is in the real world is still significant in some ways. I don't know.
It's nice to be able to have conversations with people, though, and there are people that have no idea what's going on up here, and to actually have a conversation, and sometimes because it's sold in media that they are looking after our best interests, that this is for our own safety, but sometimes if you question it and if you unpick it and you have a decent conversation and you are calm and you are understanding of where this person's coming from, that you can enlighten other people and think, well, yeah, God, I never thought of that. And they have a light bulb moment. And they might not necessarily be able to get up here, but they can support in some ways by probably, writing to an MP.
Well, this place here was made famous in the 1980s, first by Duncan Campbell. So he exposed the fact that it was being used to spy on the British telephone network. For the Americans were using this as a gateway in to listen to phone conversations.
And the exporting of data as well to the US. I'm not sure that really should happen under EU or our law, should it really?
Oh, they've just had this safe harbour judgment which says it shouldn't. So I don't know, maybe the military have got some sort of get out of jail free card on that.
Bound to have. They have yes, they do.
Well, to us, GCHQ are complicit in that they're spying for spying on the American citizens, and then the Americans are spying on us, and then it's a bit of a. Well, this is what I'm assuming is that it's just kind of a trading thing. But
well, what about this thing of if you've done nothing wrong, you should have nothing to hide?
I hate that saying. Actually, I don't want my conversations listened to. My private conversations, my Skypes to my husband when I'm working away that might be personal. I don't want them being monitored. Why should we have them monitored? I know I've got nothing to hide, but actually, yeah, I have. Those are my private conversations.
Well, these guys in here will say there is no privacy anymore.
Yeah, but there is. There should be. We're all entitled to privacy. Absolutely. That's a basic, fundamental human right.
And the point is that to have some sort of safeguards on how you operate is helpful. I mean, how armies operate or how surveillance operates. It seems to me that the argument, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide, only works if the people doing the surveillance are benevolent, doesn't it?
And open. And they're open as well.
And we've not had that sort of society in our country where we have been under a really oppressive regime. So we tend to not worry about it as much as people in other countries do, interestingly enough. But I think, to go back to the nuclear thing, to put spent nuclear fuel in bullets in Iraq, that's something that shouldn't happen. It's something you could legislate against, or, the UN should do something, in my view. That it's all very well saying you can't reinvent nuclear. Well, you can organise it better, use it for better purposes.
You see, I get worried about the whole thing because Lockheed Martin were given the responsibility to do the census, the last census that we had in Britain. And they got all the information from everybody. And they told us that we have to fill these censuses in. And we're actually told through work that we had to do it because it would be better for our communities. Absolutely not. None of our communities benefited from anything that came out of the census, I don't believe, because actually they still went ahead with all the cuts. But why were Lockheed Martin sort of commandeered to do this census? What were that about? And they get to keep the information. What's that about? Because they're not the nicest manufacturers, are they?
Well, no, they're not. And actually, Theresa May, the new Prime Minister's husband, is a big investor in Lockheed Martin.
Yes, he is, and G4S as well. So, they've got a nice thing going on. Really, I suppose, if she's kind of enforcing people being locked up, it's feeding the private prison organisations, G4S, and it's more money for his investments, I guess, isn't it? If you can get things like that. But I don't know. It is a concern that it's the whole thing. And I think that is the massive thing, is that we don't get as much support up here because there is just so much to protest at the moment, and you get a real big division amongst the sort of working people in that, well, actually, I'm more concerned about the NHS, so I'm going to go protest that. Well, I'm more concerned about the cuts in, the austerity cuts, so I'm going to focus on that. And we're all split. We're kind of all split. But I think you've still got to consider that the money that's been spent up here, that's been spent through Trident, that has a knock-on effect to money that's not going to the NHS and not going to public services. It's got to have an effect. Money is, it's been spent there. It's not been spent elsewhere. It's simple mathematics.
And I think reading things in the American press, some people feel that the same there, that the military gets its budget, and is it really accountable to the voter? And I think that we share that problem, don't we? We tend to think, just by being here or coming out with your flags, you get to talk to a lot of people, and sometimes you learn, you're changing all the time yourself. It's not just that they might change a view. We learn a lot too by, having the flag in the road. And people ask you, what are you doing? Your friends. We have a lot of military in Ripon, to talk to. We have people working here to talk to, and it's very interesting to find out how other people feel about, the choices that are made with our military.
But I mean, it certainly does seem to be a slide towards more militarism. We were told after the fall of the Berlin Wall there was going to be a peace dividend, and that doesn't really seem to have appeared. So is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
At our 2nd of July demonstration, I was quite cheered by Mike McGowan saying, you've got to see these things as an opportunity. I'm not quite sure what my opportunity is, but I'm still looking for it, really.
When we start off education, we're happy to teach about the war, about wars and things, but we don't teach peace. We don't teach children about peace. There's very little done about peace. If you want to go and study peace, you've got to go do it at university. I would like to see more teachings on peace and a more peaceful way of life, and some more, exploring that, because I don't think we do that enough. I think it's just straight in, heavy-handed, and I just think it's a terrible example that we set to our children.
Although it's interesting to me that certainly in Ripon, the British value of, that people go on in terms of education, they've been going on about, that in fact that includes the value of welcoming. And that schools, one or two have actually signed up, in Ripon have signed up for becoming City of Sanctuary, it would be sanctuary schools, aren't they? Yes, yeah. City of Sanctuary schools, where they actually do get some education in various things, with getting on with other people, and accepting difference. And I'm hoping I think that's a good movement to encourage.
That was Sarah Swift and Brigid-Mary Oates speaking to me just outside RAF Menwith Hill on the 19th of July 2016. That's just off the A59 road between Harrogate and Skipton. Well, that's all for this week. Dialects, Bristol's first weekly MP3 podcast, and has been broadcast on community radio stations in Bristol, Swindon, Preston and St Albans. If you're online, you can subscribe to our emails or download the podcast from dialectradio1word.co.uk. Thanks to our guests Sam Downey and Viren Patel, talking about the happiness agenda and happy cities based here in Bristol. Also, Sarah Swift and Brigid-Mary Oates outside the base of Menwith Hill in Yorkshire. That's where the National Security Agency spy on us, an American base inside a supposed RAF base. And they're from the Campaign for Accountability of American Bases. Thanks also to studio engineer Dave Bazanko. Dialects, a Bristol Broadband Co-op production. Catch us on Bristol Community FM 93.2 every Tuesday at noon. And anyone can contribute. Contact us through the People's Republic of Stokes Croft or Volunteering Bristol. So that was Dialect, and I'm Tony Gosling, wishing you a very good week. Thanks for listening. Till the same time next week. Goodbye for now.